In this video, we're going to reveal an astounding crime story in which three men managed to seamlessly and calmly, without weapons or violence, perpetrate numerous bank robberies, leaving no trace behind and bewildering law enforcement throughout the country. This left everyone wondering, who were these robbers, and how did they manage to commit their heists so effortlessly and rapidly? The answers are more captivating than anyone could have imagined. The principal figure behind this escapade wasn't just any ordinary criminal, but rather a police officer, a seasoned detective who knew every necessary step to execute his schemes flawlessly. The culmination of his actions would be considered one of the most notorious and remarkable bank heists in South African history. This crime story commences with an examination of the criminal's past, as well as the factors that prompted his eventual descent into criminality. Andre Stander was born on November 22, 1946, in Transvaal, South Africa. As the son of a police officer, Andre was encouraged from a young age to follow in his father's footsteps and join the police force. After graduating high school, he enrolled at the South African Police Training College near Pretoria in 1963 and completed the course successfully. His father was the commandant of the academy at that time. Due to his father's influential position in law enforcement, Andre was promoted to the rank of captain at only 26 years old. Shortly thereafter, he joined the Kempton Park Criminal Investigation Department and became a detective. He also met his partner, whom he married in the late 1960s. Despite achieving success at such a young age, Andre was not entirely content with his life and felt as if he hadn't been allowed to choose his own path. This was during the era of apartheid in South Africa, a time of significant political turmoil. Things proceeded normally for Andre until the country's political climate altered him and his life irrevocably. In 1976, he witnessed his fellow officers shoot and kill 176 unarmed schoolchildren during the 1976 Soweto uprising in an effort to uphold apartheid. But this wasn't the end of his miseries, because his personal life had started to fall apart as well, ending up in divorcing his wife, which was also a catalyst for his future downfall in life. However, as part of the chain of problems and unforeseen circumstances in his life, soon after his divorce, he discovered that his ex-wife was pregnant, and he became a father. In order to provide her and their newborn with emotional and financial assistance, Andre decided to remarry, hoping for some improvement in their relationship. Unfortunately, the second attempt also failed, and he divorced her again by 1977. Andre's life was stagnating, both personally and professionally, while South Africa's unstable political climate only exacerbated matters. It was at this juncture that Andre decided to drastically alter his life and seek a new identity and fulfillment in the criminal world. Due to his career as a police officer and detective, Andre possessed considerable knowledge about banks and their operations. Therefore, it didn't take him long to formulate a plan to rob buildings as fortified as banks, considering all the complexities involved in the task. On a typical workday in Johannesburg in 1977, Stander decided to execute his first robbery. Initially, he distributed the morning tasks to each staff member, creating an atmosphere of normalcy, then drove to the airport and flew to Durban, a journey of approximately 500 km. Notably, airport and bank security at that time was not as advanced compared to modern standards. This is why he managed to carry his revolver with him throughout his journey. After landing in Durban, Andre rented a car and drove directly to the nearest bank. In the bank's parking area, Stander disguised himself by putting on a wig and a fake beard to avoid recognition. He then calmly entered the bank and approached the cashier's desk, sat down and quietly pointed a gun at her, instructing her to fill his bag with money while maintaining a steady demeanor. Terrified and in cold sweat, but without visible distress or screaming, she filled the bag with cash, after which he silently left the bank, drove his car to the Durban airport, and flew back to Johannesburg on the next available flight, removing his disguise during the route, just in time for his afternoon shift. All of this transpired before other employees at the bank realized what had happened and notified the police. It was one of the most flawless crimes to occur in South Africa during a time when the entire country was engulfed in violence. Andre even managed to return to work before anyone noticed his absence and continued his duties as usual for the rest of the day. His first bank robbery in Durban was insignificant compared to how much he would later acquire as a bank robber in the years to come. Between 1977 and 1980, Stander robbed upwards of 30 banks, becoming one of South Africa's most sought-after criminals and acquiring around 100,000 rand. For comparison, an average white worker in a large company earned about 2,000 rand a month, which means that at this point he was very rich. Despite accumulating enough money to retire early, he chose to continue his job while simultaneously robbing banks. During these years, Stander was able to evade detection because people of color were usually suspected in such crimes. Andre's father's position in the police may have been another reason why it took the South African police almost 3 years before they caught him. As for the money Stander obtained from dozens of his robberies, he used it to purchase a new house and a car, after which he partnered with his best friend, Carl van Deventer, to open a souvenir shop in Johannesburg. Carl had no idea that his business partner was a criminal, and the souvenir shop they had opened was simply a means for Stander to launder his money, and would also very soon unwittingly uncover his dark secret. During a party in December 1979, Andre, heavily intoxicated, proposed a new business venture to Carl. This wasn't a conventional proposal, such as opening a souvenir shop. Instead, Andre invited Carl to join him in his bank robberies. He told Deventer that he had a car waiting at the airport, and it wouldn't take them much time to rob a bank and earn some quick cash. Stander hoped that his best friend would agree to become his accomplice. However, after Carl declined, Stander dismissed it as a joke. Unbeknownst to Stander, Carl was secretly a member of South Africa's Bureau of State Security, or BOSS. Soon after this unusual incident, Carl informed his superior officer that the person he had been running a souvenir shop with might be the bank robber the Bureau had been searching for. Consequently, agents were dispatched to stake out a stolen car linked to Stander, abandoned at Jan Smuts Airport. Upon searching the car, the agents discovered a balaclava, a revolver, fake license plates, disguises, and other incriminating items. The BOSS agents had found enough evidence to incriminate Andre, but to be absolutely certain, they needed to wait until he appeared at the airport parking lot, where the car was located. For the next few weeks, the Bureau of State Security agents monitored the car, waiting for Andre to make his move. Their patience was rewarded on January 3, 1980, when Andre returned to his vehicle to retrieve his disguise and embark on another flight. The agents watched as he collected his belongings from the car and then boarded a plane to Durban, where he had been robbing banks for several years. At that point, the agents did not follow him to Durban. Instead, they waited at Jan Smuts Airport for his return from robbing another bank. When Andre returned to the airport's parking lot, he carried a bag containing 4,000 rand and a revolver in his suitcase. The agents immediately confronted and arrested him on the spot. According to some estimates, Andre Stander had managed to steal an impressive $200,000 in today's currency. While not a vast sum, it was precisely one of the things crucial for him being able to get away for so long. By keeping his operations relatively small and quick, by taking only a few thousand from each of the banks, and by constantly creatively disguising himself, Andre reduced the risk of getting caught by law enforcement authorities. Stander understood that breaking open a bank vault or taking hostages would attract unwanted attention, which he wished to avoid. Moreover, Andre committed most of the bank robberies during his breaks from the office, requiring him to be quick and return to his desk unnoticed. Having been in the police force for over a decade, he knew the intricacies of police operations and responses to such crimes, and always ensured he left the scene before the police arrived. By adhering to such a simple formula for bank robbery, he managed to ascend the economic ladder and successfully evade the authorities for years. He derived pleasure from robbing, choosing the most attractive cashiers to rob and relishing the power of pointing a gun. The crime spree of the police detective in search of a feeling of fulfillment in life came to an end after he was arrested and put on trial on May 6, 1980. While giving his official statement in court, Andre Stander gave his testimony about what had led him to turn into a bank robber, where he stated that he chose to become a bank robber because he was strongly opposed to the apartheid and the events that had been taking place in South Africa in recent years. He further added that he was disgusted at how the police were being used to suppress peaceful protesters and torture political opponents. Stander mentioned the 1976 Soweto student uprising during his hearing and told the court that his disillusionment with the police service started when he and his colleagues shot and killed 176 unarmed schoolchildren on the 16th of June, 1976. The students in Soweto Township launched a protest against apartheid, which soon resulted in protests by South Africa's black community in other areas of the country as well, including Tambo, where the shooting took place. Stander claimed that when the government decided to quash the uprising with force, he was one of the police officers who had shot at the protesters. However, despite Andre's claims that he was forced to open fire on unarmed protesters, the record showed that he wasn't present with the police contingent at Soweto at the time of the shooting. While Andre had made sweeping claims about why he chose to enter the world of crime, not everyone was ready to accept his explanation. The reason for this was his police career. Stander had done his national service in Angola during the South African Border War, and returned to a desk job afterward. Many believe that the new settings might not have been as thrilling for Stander as his initial years during his posting in Angola, so he decided to rob banks along with his job. After a month-long trial and arguments from both prosecution and defense, on May 6, 1980, Andre Stander was convicted of 15 counts of robbery and sentenced to 17 years in prison for his crimes between 1977 and 1980. He was also stripped of his police badge and was transferred to Zonderwater Maximum Security Prison in Cullinan, South Africa. While this would have been the end of the road for many criminals, Andre's story was just getting started, and things were going to get even more serious than before. While in prison, Stander didn't waste time counting the days to his release. Instead, he began making new acquaintances, as he now planned something even grander. Despite his notorious past as a corrupt policeman, he quickly gained a reputation as one of the most fearless and formidable bank robbers in South African history, which helped him command respect among the other inmates. Shortly after, Andre became acquainted with another bank robber named Alan Hale. Hale wasn't as prolific as Stander and had only committed 5 bank robberies before his capture. The two men exchanged their robbery tactics and shared a fondness for political philosophy. In his later years, Hale noted that Stander vehemently opposed South Africa's oppressive regime, even refusing to speak Afrikaans, the official language. According to Alan, Stander viewed banks as symbols of greed, duplicity, and exploitation, and therefore deserving of robbery. Hale shared this sentiment, which helped them become an ideal company in this regard. Not long after, Andre proposed a prison break to Alan. Given their shared criminal inclinations and similar viewpoints, Alan readily accepted the idea, and they began planning. One component of their scheme involved one of them breaking out first and then returning to retrieve the other. However, they needed additional assistance for their plan to succeed. To this end, they shared their plans with another inmate, Patrick McCall, whom they knew well and recognized for his expertise as a car thief. They believed his skills would be invaluable in the future. On August 11, 1983, 3 years after Stander's sentencing and imprisonment, he finalized an exact plan to successfully escape from the prison. While attending a physiotherapy session with Patrick, the two overpowered the guards, seized their weapons, and stole the physiotherapist's car to flee. After evading the police for a few hours, they stopped at a farmhouse and forced the owner to call the police at gunpoint. Although this might seem like an odd decision, Stander knew exactly what he was doing. He understood the area was saturated with police roadblocks, and the only way to bypass them was by using a police van. When the police officers arrived at the farmhouse, he and Patrick took them hostage, changed their clothes, forced the farmer and the cops into the back of the van, and drove off. While they had successfully escaped from prison, they had no intention of living a life in hiding. Shortly after their escape, they stole around 13,000 rand from a building and started planning to get Alan out of prison. On October 31st, 1983, just over 2 months after the escape, they successfully extracted Alan while he was attending a trade certification exam. Andre and Patrick had once again taken the prison guards hostage and taken away their weapons. The trio fled in a getaway car to a safe house north of the town, which would be the headquarters for their criminal activities in the following months. Once the news of a second breakout became public, the media quickly started calling the 3 convicts the Stander Gang. Now, Andre wasn't alone and had 2 other reliable people to resume his streak of bank robberies, and maybe also finally gain enough wealth to satisfy their desires and find an ultimate fulfillment in life that he really wanted. The 3 robbers started robbing banks in the same nonviolent way as Andre used to do before getting caught in 1980. When the police started investigating an increasing number of bank robberies in Johannesburg as well as the way they were committed, it became clear that Andre was the mastermind behind all those crimes. Chris Sullivan, a reporter from The Guardian, received an audio recording from Alan Hale, who explained that the gang had a rule that they would not shout, use guns, or do anything violent during their robberies. He further revealed that the purpose of the exercise was not to terrorize people, but to get in and out of the bank as quickly as possible with no commotion. Because the Stander Gang would normally rob 3 to 4 banks a day, they needed to be extremely daring in their robberies. In early 1984, they even robbed a bank on the bottom floor of the very same building where a police task force was set up to catch the gang. But sometimes this kind of act also meant coming close to trouble and being almost caught again. During one such occasion, Stander had to pretend to be a jogger to get past a police checkpost. He also had to run from a restaurant once after the owner recognized who he was. The gang went on to steal a total of 500,000 rands, equivalent to $1 million in today's currency, which was more than 2 times as much as Andre had stolen when he used to operate alone between 1977 and 1980. After their successful robbing sprees, the gang spent the money on extravagance and initially had planned to keep going with the bank robberies until the tension within the group began slowly rising and their ambitions irreparably collided, creating a wedge in their partnership and friendship. In addition to their current intergroup conflicts and problems, on January 25, 1984, a hidden camera in one of the banks took their pictures during one of their robberies, which were immediately released to the newspapers by law enforcement authorities in an attempt to help catch the culprits. Following the release, several women who had visited the Stander gang's hideouts also decided to report that they knew about the whereabouts of the criminals. After the constant barrage of additional problems, the team fell apart. Andre went alone to Florida, while the other two decided that it was time to part ways as well, as their work wasn't as productive together anymore, and the arguments about the money only made things worse. While Alan left the hideout, Patrick decided to stay because he thought it was safer that way. But just 3 days later, his decision proved to be fatal when the police force surrounded their hideout and gunned him down during an exchange of fire with the authorities. The police asked Patrick to surrender to the authorities, but instead he opened fire on them, which forced the police to respond with fire. When the officers entered the hideout after Patrick's gun got silent, he was found dead on the floor. As for Alan, he made his way to Greece and spent the next year moving from place to place in Europe, trying to evade the authorities. However, in 1985, he was arrested at a bank in the United Kingdom while he was trying to reclaim his loot from a previous bank robbery. He was convicted of countless robberies and the use of a firearm by a British court that sentenced him to 9 years in prison. After completing his sentence in the United Kingdom, Alan was extradited to South Africa to face the law in his home country. He was again charged with robberies, along with other charges, and spent the next decade in South African prisons before getting released on parole in 2005. However, while in Florida, he found out that one of his friends, Patrick, had been shot dead by the police, and another member of the Stander gang, Alan, had run to Europe to avoid arrest but eventually got imprisoned as well. To make things worse, he also discovered that the South African authorities had an international warrant for his arrest, which also meant that the yacht that Stander had brought to the US to sell had also been searched for. To evade arrest by the law enforcement authorities, Andre decided to create a false identity and started presenting himself as an Australian author named Peter Harris, for which he even managed to get a fake passport. Stander managed to successfully lead his life as an Australian, even when he was stopped by the police in February 1984 for driving an unregistered car, which they confiscated. He got easily released since the police just thought of him as an Australian named Peter Harris and let him go without realizing that he was actually an international fugitive. Stander continued with his daring robberies even after changing his identity, and one day decided to steal the unregistered car back from police custody and then get it repainted and sell it to a local car dealer. This was a huge mistake on his part, because the news about him being a fugitive had been published in the newspapers and broadcast on TV with all his different disguises. The car dealer quickly realized that the person he was dealing with was that international fugitive and informed the police about it as soon as he could. The authorities tracked his movement and found his residence, but upon entering, he wasn't there because he had just luckily left to ride a bike around the city. However, on his way back, he was spotted by an officer, Michael von Stanina, who was guarding the perimeter. After realizing he was discovered, Andre tried one last time to get away from the scene, but after the officer seized him, he tried to get a hold of his revolver and, in the process, took a shot to the stomach and fell to the ground. An ambulance was immediately called by the officer, but by the time paramedics arrived, South Africa's most wanted man was already dead in the middle of the road, marking the end of his chase for an elusive fulfillment in life and his story as the most infamous and prolific bank robber in South Africa's history. This was an intriguing story about a man with seemingly good intentions and righteous views, but whose attempts to do things his way and find a purpose and meaning in the life of crime, even becoming one of the most impressive robbers in history, eventually proved to be futile, which may serve a lesson for those who might consider following the same path. If you've enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to support the channel by liking and subscribing. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. See you in the next one.